the time to join us and speak to us today, Al. Congratulations on placing within the top 5 of Tempo's Super Startups list. It'd be great to hear more about your position at Impala and what you do.
Awesome. So I'm Elle. I'm a senior product manager at Impala, which means that I work very closely with our customers to figure out where we can add most value. And I also work really closely with our design and amazing engineering teams with building our platform.
Amazing. And in your opinion, what is the best thing about Impala's culture?
I think the best thing about Impala's culture is the fact that it feels lived. That might feel like a strange answer, but somebody just asked me a few minutes ago whether I knew our values, and like at every other company I worked at, I would have probably stopped at one, if even. And I think like at Impala, there's so much investment that goes on to figure out how we can build those into our day-to-day behaviors, and how we can make sure that they go into sort of how we are measured in terms of our performance, but also how we reward each other for like great performance, whether that's through Slack channels or other bits. So it really I think the best bit of the culture is that it feels alive, and it actually feels aligned with sort of what words we use for it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, definitely. So that within the team or across all levels, there are the values, as you say, that are encompassed with everybody.
Yeah, which is bloody hard when you're remote, right? Because we're living in a bunch of different countries. Like every team is really multicultural, which is awesome. But it also means that we only get to see each other every few months, if even that, given COVID. And so building culture is really hard. But again, I think our people team do an amazing job at making sure that when you come to Impala, you don't just learn about what's it like to work at a startup, what's it like to work in travel, but you also learn about, how do those values work, how can you live them every day, how can you help other people live them every day, which is really cool.
Yeah, and so, as you mentioned, you are a remote-first company, and so when it comes to culture, what do you think some of the benefits and maybe like the pros and the cons, I guess, are of being remote-first?
Yeah, sure. So I'd never worked at a remote company before. I started at Impala mid-pandemic, and the benefits are, that there's focused work. Like previously, having always worked in in very busy rooms, it's unbelievably difficult. Like as product managers, we really like every now and then having like a 2-hour block where we can just think. And so I think that's extremely valuable. And then there's obviously all of the like lifestyle benefits where I can, there's days where I can cook 3 meals a day and have them with my partner at home, which is like really lovely. And so I think there's lots of benefits, both in terms of productivity and sort of general lifestyle choices. That being said, we actually have a small office in London where some people come together sometimes. And I found that it's just, there are certain types of collaboration for which it is invaluable getting face-to-face time in. And I find that, interestingly, even when I've just met people for a day or two in person once, the value that adds over the ongoing Zoom relationship is enormous. And so I think that actually for remote-first teams, investing in sort of get-togethers every quarter, every sort of 6 months or whenever it is incredibly valuable. Again, not just for sort of those few days, but for the ongoing relationships as well.
Yeah, no, that all sounds really positive. I guess that work-life balance that you've mentioned has really been improved, or is a benefit of being remote first. But on the flip side, when it comes to productivity, and maybe I've heard it mentioned before, creativity, sometimes you do need to meet in person for that. And I guess, is that relevant to your role? And do you find that creativity and productivity in the office is fostered better?
I think there's different types of work for which being remote or being together is better. I remember the first time we got back in together, and like we use Miro all the time, and Miro is an amazing tool for particularly as product managers and designers trying to sort of visualize things. But I remember the first time we met with design and product in person and had a whiteboard in front of us, and it was like, oh my God, this is amazing. So I think for creative work, I think we've been really lucky with tools like Miro coming up that have made that recreating the real life experience remotely a lot easier. I still think it's really hard to get to one-to-one. And so I'm really happy that Impala invests in both giving everyone the choice of sort of being remote or coming in every now and then, and then more importantly, investing in those sort of social get-togethers so you can build relationships.
So we took a look at your culture deck, and it was full of insight into what Impala's culture is like. and your core values really stood out. And so there are 4 of them, aren't there? It'd be good to hear a little bit more about them, and I guess how they are encompassed in your work as well.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, as you said, we've got 4 values. They are dream differently, which is one of my favorites, and I think one that we invest a lot of time in trying to figure out how we can live it more, because I think we're all, when you're an early stage startup, you get stuck in building stuff and executing constantly, and it can be really hard to take time out to think about, come up with completely crazy ideas, and sort of taking a step back and thinking about how you can approach something in a different way. And so, that's definitely one of my favorites. We've got Run Through Walls, which is about people just, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. That again is, I think, one of the ones that people get most nominated for, because it's just unbelievable how much effort everyone puts into what they do. And we've got No Passengers, which is about taking on work where you know that maybe it's not something you'll immediately get rewarded for, on the one hand, but I think also about when you do take on work that you really take ownership of it. I think, again, particularly in early stage companies, there's a lot of ambiguity. Things move at rocket pace, and so having everyone and you really see that when people join, like a week or 2 in, they're already starting to take ownership. And that can be sort of taking a lot of ownership over a project you own, or that can be raising something that you're uncomfortable with that's happening elsewhere. That can be business related or culture related. And so sort of speaking up and taking ownership of that as well is great. Then we've got Keep It Human, which is also super important. And I think, again, one that's even harder to live remotely. It's sort of very... when you're in a room together, it's much easier to read the temperature of how other people are feeling, and you can sort of take time out to take care of each other, and it's harder to do that when you're on Zoom. And so, again, that's one where we really often try to sort of speak up and out when people sort of display really exceptional behaviors there. So yeah, we've got like a Slack channel for culture. We call it Culture Beat Strategy, which is one of my favorite channels, where people sort of go in, and I think almost every other day, if not every day, somebody gets nominated for exceptional behaviors for one of those 4 values. And I find, you could think it's just a Slack channel, but again, when you're remote, I think those things make a big difference in reminding people of what those values actually mean and how they can live them. And then they sort of fit into how we are rewarded in terms of our sort of performance reviews as well. So it's really sort of across the board in terms of how, it's not just sort of top down of your direct line manager saying you need to live these values, but it's also sort of across and diagonally within the business, making sure that people can call out positives.
Yeah, that definitely touches on, that day-to-day aspect of retaining culture, making sure people across the business are emphasizing and acknowledging your values, and finding ways in which to champion that. And I think there are definitely learnings to take from that for other businesses if they were looking at you as an example to lead by. So when it comes to your benefits list as well, also very extensive. So yeah, good to hear from you what your kind of favorite benefits are, or which ones stand out to you the most.
Yeah, sure. It is a long list. I really like that we have a monthly budget that breaks into different sections, and we've got a lifestyle and a health section in there. And I've actually started regularly going to yoga classes, because it's one of those things where usually I'm a very lazy person. I find every excuse I can not to exercise. And so it's just taking away one more hurdle that takes away my excuses not to go and exercise. So I think, again, it seems... It might seem like something really small, but the fact that the people team have gone through the efforts of breaking up our different benefits into sections where they're like, we want you to invest in your, in your health, and we want you to invest in your work from home budget, so I can go and buy really nice coffees that, again, otherwise I probably wouldn't. And so sort of recognize that there are different parts of working remotely, where there are things that you would usually get in an office that you might not have access to at home, that I really enjoy, and where I feel treated on a consistent basis, which is really nice.
Yeah, definitely. And if you're looking for people to join Impala and to join the team, what kind of key values do you look for in people, and is important to find when bringing people into the business?
Yeah, sure. I think I always, when people ask, what's it like to work at Impala and what are the people like, I think sort of curious and kind and lovely are sort of the main words that I use. I think we are an early stage startup, and so having people who display both a huge level of curiosity, but also a huge level of ownership, sort of from day one, that come in and sort of have that drive to say, I want to write my first line of code in the first week, or I want to go and contribute something somewhere, is really key. And then there's the point on keeping it human with kindness, which we define as not just being nice to each other, because it's very easy being nice to each other, but more importantly to also consistently provide really honest feedback, which is yet another thing which is so hard to do when you're remote, because in person it's easier to have a frank conversation. And so we're constantly thinking about how we can do more there.
Mm-hmm. And Impala's actually used Tempo recently to add a couple of people into the people and HR functions. So would you say it's also as important for people who maybe are hired on a temporary basis to exhibit signs of your culture and your key values?
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone who works with the business will work better with the business, where they sort of display some of the same attitude that we have within the company. Again, I keep coming back to us being an early stage business, where curiosity and ownership are really key to people being successful in their role, whether that's a permanent role or a temporary role. And so we always get really excited, even when temporary joiners are joining, when they display those attitudes from day one, because luckily sort of curiosity and ownership on things that need training, but just something that people display naturally. And we've been really lucky with the people we've brought on board where that's really by and large been the case.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm, definitely. And so reflecting back on your time at Impala so far, when is a time that you felt really proud to belong to the team? What's been one of the best achievements that you've seen the business or you personally or the team achieve?
I think the bits where I always get really proud is where there is an exceptional team effort that leads to stuff that people start a cycle or a quarter with thinking that's a really stupid, silly target. We talk about lofty goals, and so whenever we've smashed through lofty goals as a team, and it only ever happens as a team, where people from different functions, be it within product we work with design and engineering and other functions, or be it sort of across the company as a whole, come together and dream differently or think differently in terms of how they approach a problem that seems completely ludicrous when you start it, and then you get over it. And we've had a few of those moments, like last year before Christmas, we shipped a huge amount of work, which again just was one of those things where we thought it was never going to happen, and then it did, and then we all went off into the Christmas break, and it was really nice. So yeah, I don't think it's like a single moment, but it's like that ongoing feeling of setting lofty goals and then sometimes hitting them and then being really happy about that.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. And if you were to give advice to, say, other businesses that are thinking about their culture now and thinking about how to retain culture in their businesses, what key things could you reflect on, maybe on your onboarding process or on the culture as it stands at Impala, that you think is important for other businesses to know?
I think you just have to always invest about 300% more in it than you think you'd have to. Whether it's sort of our weekly whole team meetings where we repeat our values and we sort of have monthly nominations for the culture champion, or whether it's having those Slack channels where you repeat them, and also sort of having sporadic check-ins on whether those values are still true, because obviously as a startup we with every new person we hire we become a slightly different company, so really just never thinking for a moment that when you write down a few values and put them on a deck, that's the job done. That's really the very, very early beginning, and then the hard work continues from there. Personally, I really found that the onboarding that's more extensive at Impala than I've ever experienced it before was a huge help in that, with really understanding not just what the culture is defined as, but how that is lived on a daily basis.
Amazing. And if you have any hopes and dreams for what Impala will achieve in 2022, what would they be, and how would you like to see Impala's culture grow?
I think we're going to keep growing at a crazy pace. I think we're now, when we started, I was still very comfortably at a point where I sort of knew every individual at the business. And we're now sort of, I think, reaching that point where it's very, very hard to maintain a relationship with every person in the business. And so what I hope, from a business perspective, I hope that we keep growing at the pace that we're at. And I hope that we continuously find smarter, better ways of adding value to the customers that we work with. And then from a culture perspective, I hope that we manage to maintain the culture that we have today as we scale. Because I've not gone through that scale period personally previously, but luckily quite a few people in our senior leadership team have. And so, I think the main thing that I hope for is that as we scale, we manage to maintain that level of sort of living our values every day.
And just make sure that you retain that culture and those values that you live and breathe so effortlessly right now, even when you are, scaling rapidly down the line.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time today. And hopefully chat to you again soon.
Awesome. Thank you.